What I want to do is I want to show you some of our customer case studies because it makes it easier to actually understand how our technology is being used and why our technology is actually being used. So to introduce myself again, I'm Hans O'Sullivan. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of StorMagic. And in this session, I'd like to bring you through some of our best customers and why they're using our technology. So typically, these are some of the verticals that we're addressing today. Retail has been very, very important to us. Retail has a big problem. They actually found us some years ago, and once you start closing some large opportunities within retail, the rest tend to follow fairly quickly because they've all got the similar problems that they're trying to solve. Government, there's one of the European governments uses us for consulates and embassies throughout the world. You can kind of understand the reasons they want to do that as well. The last thing they want to do is employ their own IT guy in each one of these locations, and they're highly unlikely to want to use local IT resources in one of these locations as well. So having a highly available system with remote management becomes very important to them. Defence, battlefield control systems. I've yet to come across an IT guy that's quite happy to actually be dropped in the middle of a battlefield to fix a system that isn't working. So you can understand why they wouldn't be too pushed about that as well. Manufacturing. And this is interesting because this could be within a site. So I keep talking about distributed enterprise, remote locations, but an actual process within a plant can require that high availability and centralized management as well. If you've got a silicon chip fabrication plant, if that goes down for a couple of seconds, you count the cost in millions. It has that quick an effect on the system. So, there they require cost-effective, high availability as well. Financial services, restaurants and hospitalities. I mentioned earlier, restaurants are getting more and more automated. We're actually working with a company in Japan at the moment that are going to be shipping out systems where you don't get a menu, you're going to get an iPad. And on that iPad, you get pictures of what you want to eat. You can choose the language you want. You'll be shown how to actually eat it if it's an ethnic food. From there you order, it goes through to the kitchen gets a printout saying put this food on that plate now, that food on that plate now, and plans everything so that table of 10 people all get their meal at the same time. Then at the end automatically calculates it and this is your bill. You can imagine the effect on them if that system stops working. So high availability becomes very important to them as well. Transportation, energy production. I'll give you some examples on the energy production side as we go through this presentation, and medical pack systems. So, this is our largest customer. We're not allowed to say to actually use their brand. You can probably take a guess on who it is. It's a large box retailer here in the US with 2,200 locations. They have 7 applications per site that are very important to them. They, previous to us, had 2 servers and a SAN device in each of those locations. They found that they were getting between 2 to 5 SAN failures a week. Those SAN failures were costing the business thousands. In fact, if the SAN failed completely and they lost their data, it could be $500,000 or more because they'd have to restock take in the entire store. They needed something that had no single point of failure, that was highly available, that was centralized management, and that actually solved the problem for us. And they tested all of the technologies in the market and found that we were by far the best fit to actually solve their problems. I think I give some figures on here. So they wanted high availability, they wanted to reduce infrastructure cost, they wanted to improve manageability from the center, they wanted to be able to roll out from the center, they wanted to be able to upgrade from the center, and they do that today on 6 or 7 consoles they have.
I think it's actually 8.
It's 8, is it now? Yeah. But they're all in one room, one location. Centrally, they can manage all of these locations. So some of the figures on that alone. On the capital expenditure, we're able to reduce it for them by 30%. Their operational expenditure, we're able to reduce by 40%. That gave them a return on investment very, very quickly. We have totally reduced the failures that they were having in the field, where typically they were having 2 to 5 a week previously. In the last year, they had 2 failures, absolutely nothing to do with us. Our software did everything it was meant to do, 2 failures compared to what they were getting previously. They've been able to do this very, very cost effectively with that centralized management. They're doing this on VMware. They're using vSphere as their hypervisor, and they're using vCenter as their management console centrally as well. We improve performance for them because of the active-active capability, and we are able to give them total freedom from the hardware vendor of their choice. So if they, for instance, get a problem with any of their servers, they can ship out a new server to the site. It doesn't need a highly trained person to plug in that new server. And part of what our technology actually does is it keeps all configuration information on the remaining server. So when you plug in that second server with the hypervisor installed, we can automatically upgrade that new server, even if it is different hardware. It needs to be at least as good, but even if it's different hardware, we can upgrade that server and bring it back into a highly available synchronized pair.
So you're almost zero touch. You can almost deploy a box with your software on it and it'll...
We're trying to get as close as possible to that, yes. You've got 1,000 locations, it can add up fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, from obviously being at scale with so many different locations and having a proper SAN at the edge location would be a nightmare for all the failures. Yours is only software, so the underlying hardware still needs to be resilient and available and that kind of thing. Does your VSA, does that then run on, I'm thinking, if it's an HP server, does the HP server, do you then configure a RAID array with RAID 5 or RAID 10 or whatever, that kind of thing? Do you have then recommendations for how that should be set up? Or are you using JBOD, for example? How does your... how does the system work?
Typically within that server?
I'm thinking further on that obviously something like a wind farm, as Christopher was saying, if someone needs to drive 6 to 12 hours, you don't want one disk to fail and then a second disk fails and the whole site is down. You want to have some more protection in that. So is that a hardware issue, or do you do anything?
That's more of a configuration issue. So we will take anything. So you could have a RAID array underneath, you could do JBODs. It really depends on a number of things. So how many failures you want to sustain on your disk. So your wind farm, so maybe what you do is you'd go for a RAID 6 and then put a hot spare on the end as well. So the guy driving out in 12 hours, if there's an additional failure, you don't run into that situation. But don't forget as well, in that point, even if one server did have multiple disk failures, you still have that surviving server, and that's where we would come in to ensure that that continues. Okay, so it depends on the application.
So the cost trade-off of adding more drives for more availability is actually a hardware issue. You're just a, I don't want to say dumb VSA, that sounds bad, but you're just a simple VSA.
Simple VSA, yeah.
Okay.
So if I have like a fat twin, a super micro array with two discrete servers inside of a 3U enclosure, and they've got identical storage on both. That's not shared storage, but can I still...
You could mirror between the two.
Okay.
Yeah. We'd mirror that storage.
Okay.
The one thing that doesn't get you is everything's in a single box. And if it's in a single box, there's a higher probability of the entire box failing, whether it's because of power issues or because someone drives a forklift into it or whatever.
You still need switching to connect the two.
No.
Not necessarily. So you'd have a switch for your production. So your VMs need to get out to terminals or whatever happens to be out there. The VSAs themselves, they've got two types of traffic. They have our mirroring, so that's for the VSAs to stay in sync, and iSCSI just so the host, in this case ESX, can access those iSCSI targets. So with that, what you can simply do, you don't need additional switching, you just put crossover cables, patch cables in between the hosts, and everything is isolated. So this reduces your cost because you don't need extra network devices, and it just makes the whole environment more simplistic on the back end.
And that's quite typical what our customers would actually do.
Yeah. Now, if you
crossover cables.
Yeah,
crossover cables.
If you scaled out, you'd need to introduce a switch, obviously, for connectivity. Right. But again, with the two-host configuration, that's what we'd be looking at.
You need 10 gig networking?
No, 1 gig. The beauty of it as well, and sorry, Lance. So 10 gig's great. Depends on your capacity of your disk or the throughput of the disks, because are you going to saturate your 10 gig link with writes? Maybe, maybe not. It depends how many disks and what quality of disks are in there. But what we'll do with our mirror traffic, so if you have multiple 1 gig connections, we will actually aggregate those links.
LACP?
Yeah, so we'll actually, so let's say, again with the crossover cable, if we have two 1 gig connections, our mirror traffic will look at that and it will go, oh, okay, I've got a 2 gig pipe. So our mirror will be syncing on the back end at 2 gig, and if you localize using iSCSI fixed path to the local hosts, to the VSA on their hosts, you'll be on the internal network stack of VMware HyperV, which has a high throughput, and then the mirroring will be syncing at 2 gig on the back end.
So is that configuration that you do, or do you LACP at the ESXi?
Well, you're just using standard multipathing within, say, the iSCSI initiator. So VMware, you've got fixed, most recently used, and is it round robin, I believe. If you set it fixed local, you're within your host, so each VSA is on their local host. That host uses the IP address for its iSCSI target, which is local to it. So you sit within the kernel, the VM kernel and the virtual machine port groups.
You would need a distributed vSwitch license to do that scenario?
Standard vSwitch is absolutely fine.
Okay.
And in the StorMagic user interface, you've got, say we've got the 2 redundant links there, and one of them were to fail, is there some type of reporting, alerting mechanism up so someone goes and changes it?
So we will notice that there's network connectivity issues. We'll report that over a monitoring tool, which I'll talk more to.
You'll talk to it, or you'll show it to us later?
I can show you as well. Yeah, we can talk to it. We can
I love talk, but...
Yeah. You'll see it. But again, because we're using standard multipathing, ESX, for example, will see, oh, okay, I've got a path failure. And then you'll just see a dead path, but you still got other active paths as well.
So you mentioned HyperV. Is this a VMware-only solution? Or?
No, VMware and HyperV. We have other solutions running in the lab, but those are our 2 main focuses.
We have both KVM and Zen running in the lab as well, but having it running in the lab and having it productized are 2 different things. And it's actually quite interesting. I often get asked, what are we seeing in our particular market? And what we have been, for the last couple of years, it is almost completely VMware. If I look at our pipeline, I'd say at the moment it's about 30 to 40% Hyper-V. And if I look at the amount of questions I get asked, I keep getting asked about KVM and Zen, KVM more than Zen.
So what does the Hyper-V solution look like? Is that a VM with attached? Okay.
So again, you just pass the hard drives up, find it
from
to the VSAs.
host, and then you can fail over the VM and the...
Correct. And you could also use storage space underneath if that was the way that you wanted to go. Yeah.
So if I had a third node, and does it continue just mirroring, or can I go to like a network grade 5 or anything like that?
It's always 2-way mirroring.
Okay.
So it's always in pairs. So if you were to have a third node, you would split the storage between them. So you'd end up essentially with 3 mirrors across the tool. Now, if you didn't need any more storage, for example, or capacity, performance in your storage is great, you could just chuck a third node in there with CPU and memory just for compute resources. Because we're iSCSI, present it out across the network, and it will read and write just across the network. So no additional cost for additional storage.
So you could use this as a centralized SAN for existing workloads, for example, to move things around.
So, for argument's sake, you could take ESX i3 or Hyper-V Core, put one of our appliances on there, and turn that whole box into a SAN if you really wanted to.
So what's the management effect of setting up the 3-way replication between these various boxes? Like, what's the level of effort there? Do I have to say, you replicate to there, but you only replicate to there because it's 2-way?
It's always 2 ways. So, I mean, our interface is simplistic, and you go, I want to create a mirror between those 2 VSAs, and it tells you how much storage. I'll be demonstrating a 2-host configuration, and from that...
It is all a manual configuration, but does it complain that if you don't have a mirror established between 2 separate VSAs when you have a third node?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
We've set up one box. When you go to add some storage, you go to present some storage up, so you can present a data store. Does it require you to point to your secondary VSA you'll be doing your replication with?
So the VSAs will have the mirroring on the back end. So when you configure the storage piece, you will create a mirror. Okay.
But when I've got 3 nodes.
Okay, but you can create 3 mirrors across them. Again, that would be using a wizard-based configuration to actually create those 3 mirrors. But what our management piece actually does is it does all the provisioning on all the way up. So you go, I want a mirror between A and B, and I also want a mirror between B and C. Go and do it. We'll go create the iSCSI targets, the mirrors, and basically build them up, log in the iSCSI initiators, format it with a VMFS so it's all there and ready to go.
And is that then a single VSA per each of those 3 nodes?
It would be, yeah. There'd be one on each.
Okay.
Yeah. If you wanted to
it's automated. I just heard you say it was automated from as soon as you create the volume. It automatically mounts it up and provisions it. And
Are you showing that later?
Yeah, I'll be showing provisioning.
Very cool.
Now, obviously, if you have 2,200 locations, you don't want to sit there and click through with each time. So we have PowerShell in there as well. So that was all scripted, and off it went and did its thing.
Nice.
We'd love to see the simple management. I think that's your...
Yep, we'll get to it. Presume you don't ask too many questions and cut it one at a time.
As a suggestion, like, is it really important that we go through with these slide bits?
No, I don't
before we
think so.
jump into that?
I was about to say the same, and what I was going to say, I'm literally going to jump over about 5 seconds on each of them because I've already talked about them, and then hand over to Luke, because we've been 1 hour in, and I think you've seen the product is more important. So, Eon Energy, someone's talking about half an hour drive away. No, it's 4 days it takes them to get out to the wind farm typically, so it's even worse. It's a strange situation because I'm running one application. It's a management application. What they needed was high availability, and that's the reason they've moved to virtualization, was the high availability more than anything else.
And in those environments, how are they doing their witness? Just asking because it was beaten to death, so just kind of ask, is it a remote witness over a WAN link?
Do you remember, Luke?
No, I think they're doing what you were saying without a witness. And they have it.
You brought it up.
Yeah.
Clearly.
But I don't believe they're using witnesses, no, because they don't have a WAN link in each single tower.
So do they have some type of witness?
No.
Okay.
No.
Basically,
network redundancy.
Best practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oil rigs, safe kick. This part of the world, I think, aren't they, in Texas somewhere, if I remember rightly? Oil rig management systems, they're using our technology there as well. I mentioned the German army, and these would either be trucks like this with the technologies built in, or boxes that are parachuted down into the middle of the battlefield.
I love this slide. So I said it looks like they've invaded Florida.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
So, watch out.
Germany's in a war zone?
No, but they could be.
Do you have any partnerships with hardware vendors? Because obviously parachuting things in oil rigs you need a ruggedized device.
Yes.
Obviously, you aren't going to HP or Dell or something. Do you have partnerships with people that can sell you?
We very definitely do. So we have partnerships with all the main server vendors and a lot of the application vendors and vertical OEMs as well. People have mentioned left-hand HP earlier. HP are actually our biggest partner. We have a strong relationship with Cisco. We have a strong relationship with IBM, now Lenovo. We have a strong relationship with Dell. We work with all the server vendors, and you kind of look at them and say, aren't they your competitors? And you realize that, well, actually what we do is very different to what they do, and in certain applications they realize that we're a much better fit.
Your solution sells their hardware.
Exactly.
How can they not want to be a part of that?
Exactly. And I think that was the last slide on that one. See, I said it'd be fast in the last few slides. Luke, you haven't been doing much talking.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
Do you see a lot of this being deployed in active war zones? I just got back from Afghanistan, and I'll tell you, I can't say what we did, but we did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of infrastructure around a lot of places.
No, so I mean, I give you the example of the German army. We do have some business here with the U.S. military, shall we say? Not an awful lot at this stage. It's a longer business to break open, if you know what I mean. So certainly, we think there's opportunity there for us. We're working on opportunity. I would not refer to it as one of our largest verticals at the moment.